What do Falcons do? Rise up. Welcome to Rise Up Reactions, the show where we talk all things Falcons, NFL, Georgia sports, and in general, the sports news of the day. I'm your host, Dr. Lee Denning, the Golden Hard Dog, and a lifelong sports fan. So guys, finishing up today with the predictions for the entire NFL. We've done the NFC. We've done 3 divisions out of the AFC. We're coming back today talking about the AFC West. Really quick, trying to get to 500 subscribers by the end of the 2023 season. Thank you to the 137 who have done so as of the making of this video. It means the world to me. If you don't mind, if you're watching first time, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It really helps a small channel like me grow and reach more people. But without further ado, let's jump into the AFC West discussion. Now, the way I've been doing this is talking about it from perspective of, what unique opponents do they play, what things have happened in the offseason that generally are going to affect the season. I give a floor, I give a ceiling, and I give my rough prediction of where I think a team is going to finish. And this is a division that has a bunch of teams that could be playoff contenders, and then one team that I think is going to pretty much be bad. So, without further ado, let's talk about it. They are all going to be playing the AFC East, including the Bills, the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Patriots. They are all going to be playing the NFC North in the Lions, the Packers, the Bears, and the Vikings. And then they play everybody within the division 2 times for a total of 6 games. So we're going to start off with the Chiefs because they're the easiest ones to predict, the easiest team to talk about. The Chiefs didn't lose much. They didn't gain much. They're going to be playing at the Jags in Week 2. They get the Eagles at home in Week 11, and then they get the Bengals at home in Week 17. It's tough to be the king. It's tough to finish on top, and as such, they get to play some of the harder opponents in each division in the AFC AFC. They do have the same core, more or less. They lost Juju, but it really isn't much. As long as they've got Mahomes and Kelsey, they are going to have their core together. Their offensive line did lose Orlando Brown, but they did manage to replace him. Mahomes is easily the best quarterback in the draft, and they did pretty good in the draft, I should say best quarterback in the league. And they did great in the draft. They got Rashee Rice, who I love. They got him at the back end of the second round after trading up for him. I like him. I think he would have been a better third-round pick, but still solid receiver. He's going to probably turn into a solid player for him. Felix Anudike Uzoma was a rising star on boards. They took him in the first round as a defensive end, so they really have only gotten better. Isaiah Pacheco should be the lead back this year for them. Fantasy gold last year late in the season, and a guy who probably should have been their starting running back the entire time. They still do have Jerick McKinnon as well, who will be there as a pass-catching back, and will be taking a little bit away from Isaiah Pacheco, but still a guy who's going, pretty late in fantasy drafts in terms of starting running back. So if you want to get somebody that could possibly win your league, it's going to be Pacheco. But again, this is a solid team, solid offense, solid defense. Andy Reid is a fracking genius. Their floor is only 10-7. If enough things go poorly, I could see them having a winning record, but not finishing as well as they have. Their ceiling is probably about 14-3, 15-2, just because they do have to play the Bills, the Bengals, the Eagles, the Jags, the Lions, the Dolphins, the Jets. There's enough teams in there. I think they could reasonably lose 3 games out of that. So I'm going to say 14-3 is their ceiling. I'm going to put them at 13-4, easily winning the division, or not necessarily easily, but they're going to win the division unless somebody dethrones them like one of the other 3 teams I'm going to talk about. So moving on, let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. So they get the Steelers in Week 3. They get the Giants in Week 9. Both of those are at home. And then they get the Colts at the Colts in Week 17. So probably fair teams to be playing for them and what I anticipate to be their overall talent level. Now, the big problem for the Raiders is, as of the making of this video, Jimmy G, who you took and basically you got rid of Derek Carr, who had a solid connection with Davante Adams and is the reason that Davante Adams came to you, you got rid of him. And in his place, you now have Jimmy G. That's not an upgrade. At best, it's a even trade. At worst, Derek Carr had more upside, so I don't know what you're doing there, but you've taken a guy who can't pass his physical. He has not been cleared to play yet. And if he can't play, you are absolutely screwed. You're going to be left with Brian Hoyer and Aiden O'Connell, a guy you took late in the draft out of, I think he's from Purdue, so you're going to be left with a rookie. You also don't have Josh Jacobs firmly on the roster yet. He has not agreed to sign on yet. He is trying to hold out to get some money because he sure as heck deserves it. You did bring on Jacoby Myers. You lost Matt Collins to the Falcons. I think it's our gain. But again, you have some pieces here, and you've got Austin Hooper as well, losing Darren Waller. you've got pieces. I'm not going to lie. You've got some pieces to potentially have an up and down team. You've got Max Crosby on defense, but I don't think you've got a whole lot else. I don't like this team's makeup overall. I think that your coaching staff is bad, and Josh McDaniels, I think he's easily the worst coach in the division. You could easily have a bad season, and especially if Jimmy G doesn't play. And if Jimmy G doesn't play, I'm going to say your floor is 4-13 or 3-14. I'm going to give you some credit and say some of your opponents are easier, and you're going to get 4-13 out of this. But your ceiling, even if Jimmy G is healthy, I don't see you winning this division, and I don't see you going above 10-7, which may not make the playoffs the way everything's coming out. So I do have them finishing 6-11. I don't like the Raiders this year. I think they're going to be poised to be better in years to come, but I think they're going to be picking top 10 for sure this next year. I could be wrong. Would be happy to be wrong for the sake of the players and the fans, but I really think they're going to be bad this year, and I think this is going to be Josh McDaniels' last year as their head coach. But moving on, we're going to talk about the Chargers. Now, the Chargers, I'm a little bit biased towards. They have a friend of the channel in former Falcons long snapper Josh Harris on their team. Still amazing Pro Bowl long snapper. Hope he has a continued prosperous career out with LA. But anyways, they are going to draw the same opponents as everybody else, and then they go to the Titans on week 2. I think that's an easy game for them. They get the Ravens in week 12. It just depends on which version of Lamar Jackson is playing at that time. And they get the Cowboys in week 6. So they get a couple of those at home, and then they get one on the way. One of those teams, Titans, that's going to be an easy game. The others, having them at home will help. I'm hopeful that the Chargers will actually start developing a fan base out there. It's been a little bit embarrassing for them to not have as many fans as the LA Rams, and really to not draw fans in for the most part the last few years. But I still think that they have a frickin' amazing offense with Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Justin Herbert, and then who else do they have? Mike Williams. And then they drafted this year a wide receiver in Quentin Johnston. Again, it's hard to say who's going to be the best receiver out of the guys taken in the first round. He was one of the first 4 taken off the board. Could end up being the best wide receiver in the class. It's hard to say. He wasn't projected to be that, but he could end up doing that. So you have a solid offense. Defense, you have a new coordinator in Derek Ansley. You have a new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. And you have a top 5 offense with a defense that should at worst be middle of the road this year. And as long as you don't implode along the way, this is a team that I think is completely boom or bust. And I think it's going to be a lot more boom. With their floor, I don't think they finish below 8-9. I can see a scenario where things go poorly and they lose a lot of one-score games and blow up in weird spots. I can certainly see that, but I don't think it's going to happen. So I'm going to say they're going to finish closer to their ceiling of 14-3, finish second in the division at 12-5. I could easily see them dethroning the Chiefs this year, though I had predicted that the last couple of years, and it's bit me in the butt. So I'm going to back off of that this time, but I do think that they finish as the top wild card team for the AFC and will be the 5 seed in the playoffs. And I think that that's a pretty solid prediction. I think you're going to have most of your playoff teams. I don't know. I don't know if you're going to have 3 from this division, but you're definitely going to have 2, I think. And then moving on, let's talk about the other team that I think could be a playoff team here in the Broncos. Now, the Broncos, Russ, he did not ride very well last year. He was a complete and total mess. There are some things that are going on in the background as Broncos fans. I love Brandon Perna's show. That's Good Sports GPS. Love Tom Grossi and everything he is doing. Love what those guys have built together. I'm sorry, Brandon, but your team, I'm not convinced is going to be great this year. I think you're going to be better for sure. Getting Sean Payton as your head coach, I think, is a win all around. I think he is the best person that could potentially fix Russ. Russ has been showing his workouts this offseason. He looks great. But again, everybody looks great in the offseason. It's hard to really say what you're going to do. But if Russ comes back to Seattle Seahawks level Russ, yeah, this team is going to be freaking amazing. They still have solid offensive pieces. You're going to have, a healed Javonte Williams, who was going as a top 12 fantasy prospect last year before he got hurt. And you had this team losing 9 one-score games in spectacularly stupid fashion last year. If they win all of those, they won 14 games last year. They didn't do that. They screwed it up in spectacular fashion in a number of ways, as evidenced by Brandon Perna's the new worst, or new, whatever it was, the worst games ever. They had a lot of those last year. They can only go up. I don't see them going down. Their floor, again, they're going to get the Commies week 2, they're going to get the Browns week 12, and then they go to the Texans in week 13. I think you can win a lot of your games this season, even going to the AFC East and having a lot of hard games there. I think your floor is 7-10. I don't see any scenario where you were as bad as you were last year or worse than you were last year at 5-12. 7-10 is your floor. I do see, I think you're going to be at minimum 2 games better. Ceiling, I think it's 13-4. When I was looking at it, I see enough games there where I think you're not going to win out in the division with everybody else's ceiling. But I'm going to say you finish 11-6. I could make a case for 12-5 or that 13-4. But I'm going to say you finish 11-6. And I got to look at it. The next video I have coming out will be determining where everybody is on the playoff bracket and how that's going to shape out. I don't know if it makes the playoffs. I think it's a solid record and a solid future for you, but I just don't know if it makes the playoffs for you. I'm kind of thinking it does, maybe as the 7th seed right now. But again, there's at least a couple of divisions that could have 3 playoff teams from them, and there's at least 3 divisions that have teams that are solid enough to all have winning records in at least a thirds of the division, I guess I should say 3/4 of the division. But guys, that's all I got for you. That's going to wrap up the AFC conversation. Again, the next video I have coming out is going to be discussing the overall playoff picture that I'm projecting and how I think that's going to go out. But thank you so much for watching, liking, sharing, subscribing. Again, I'm trying to hit that 500 goal, so if you don't mind subscribing, would really love it, and it helps the channel out. Thank you to everybody who's done so far, and as always, guys, rise up.